We're here interviewing Aisha Moe for the, she's running for State Senate in District 26. And I'm Greg Jabowski. I'm the secretary of the Dane County chapter of Our Wisconsin Revolution. And I'm with Ashley Hudson.
Yeah, hi, my name is Ashley Hudson, and I am the Southwest Regional Organizer for Our Wisconsin Revolution. And yeah, I'm just gonna be joining and interviewing Aisha today.
Okay, and Aisha, if you want to give a, not where you stand or anything, because we'll be getting into that, but just an introduction of who you are for our listeners.
Absolutely. My name is Aisha Moe. I am running for State Senate in the 26th Senate District. I am a Muslim American young woman who a recent graduate of the UW-Madison, where I studied mathematics and African cultural studies.
Thanks. And I should mention that Aisha, we do know she is also in our Wisconsin Revolution. She's on the steering committee.
I am a member of our Wisconsin Revolution.
Yeah, we'll just mention that. And should we go right into asking the questions, Ashley?
Yeah, we can go ahead and get started. Would you like
Aisha,
oh, go ahead.
Okay. Do you support publicly funded elections? Why or why not?
I do support publicly funded elections. I think it's extremely important that the richest among us are not the only ones who are able to represent us. The cost of running a campaign has been exorbitant, and it makes it impossible for lower class and working class folks to actually represent the beliefs that they have, because they don't have the same resources of abundance of money that the richest among us are able to pull out of thin air, it feels like.
All right, thank you, Aisha. All right, so next question is, do you favor extending the time frame to vote at the polls during elections to a minimum of 2 weeks ahead of the election date?
I do. I think it's extremely important that voting is treated as if it is something that we all have access to. I also believe that if at the bare minimum we are unable to create a time frame where voting is extended, that we're at least allowing that the election day be a national holiday and making it so that everyone can get out and go vote. At least whether that be like a national holiday, whether that be for a presidential election or a general election, or a statewide holiday for statewide elections.
What model or plan do you prefer for redistricting?
I support Tony Evers' nonpartisan redistricting commission that he created. I think it's a very good approach. I hope that they are using the data and the formula that's created to be the most effective to making sure that every Wisconsin citizen has their voice heard. And notice how I didn't say voter, because I want to also point out that there are citizens in Wisconsin who, because of the turn of events, were unable to vote, whether because they are non-citizens or they are undocumented workers in our community. And they are also affected by the legislation that gets passed in our state legislature. And so it's extremely important that we not only voice the opinions of those who can vote, but we amplify the voices of those who are just here supporting our community.
Great, thank you, Aisha. Next question. Okay. What are your top 3 legislative priorities? What will you do to move them through the legislature?
I honestly always find this question really kind of funny, because picking your top 3 legislative policies that you love the most is like picking a favorite child. It's almost impossible, or a favorite sibling. It's nearly impossible. But given that I have to choose 3, I would go with Medicare for All, a Wisconsin Green New Deal, and a plan for racial equity. Specifically, how that will look like. Medicare for All, I recognize, is a federal agenda. It is something that at the state level, all you can do is truly just work with our partners at the federal level to make sure that they understand how important Medicare for All is, as well as expanding our statewide Medicaid to be able to cover every person, make sure that they have health care here in Wisconsin, or access to health care here in Wisconsin, by accepting the money to expand Medicaid, but also creating Badger Care as an option for everyone, regardless of whether you have a job. You should be able to have access to health care. So, and then in regards to the second point I said, was a Wisconsin Green New Deal, it would be an extremely monumentous choice to have an actual written plan about how we want our state to become more energy efficient and cleaner. Some specific policies from that I can think of, that I can pull out for you right now, are about making sure that we're ending harmful practices and toxic chemicals that destroy our waterways, because in Wisconsin, that is one of honestly, our treasures here in Wisconsin. As well as making sure that we are, as a state, not actively funding the fossil fuel industry, and instead taking any funds that are being given to the fossil fuel industry and use it to honestly invest in renewable energies. And lastly, in regards to a plan for racial equity, this is not an easy fight, but it's a fight that we need to be taking every single day. It's not new. It's not new to 2020. This is something that has been going on for so long, and people in our community have been suffering for so long. And every day we do not take an action, there are effects for our community and for members of our community that are life or death. I can name a couple of policies, but ultimately this is going to take a long time, and I need everyone to do everything in their power to educate themselves and support the people around them who have a voice and amplify what they are asking for. Okay, a couple of very specific policies in regards to racial equity would be making sure that the education system is one that supports everyone. And that would require ending the voucher school system, which has effectively created two public school systems, one for the rich elite and one for those who are unable to be able to get into exclusionary schools that take public funding away from their school. Additionally, I think we need to end for-profit prisons, which has created a system where you could basically profitize off of the criminalization of communities of color. And lastly, I think that affordable housing is something that should be guaranteed. I think housing in general should be guaranteed, but I also believe that there should be rent control so that we can have affordable housing in every neighborhood.
In the emergence from the pandemic, would you support a state-level economic hardship payment? Do you support direct payments to residents? And describe the top 5 components that you think should be in such a bill.
So I actually produced a COVID-19 response plan. I do support a universal base. I did in that plan support a universal base income of $2,000 given by the federal government to every citizen to manage the hardships of this pandemic. In that plan, which is available on my website, aishaforstatesenate.com, you can also see that we called for a rent freeze, making sure that we freeze rent because we were also asking people to stay home, and many people lost their jobs. I also called for the ending of foreclosures and evictions to make sure that people were able to still live and have a home to stay at home in. And I'm gonna be honest, given how high the exposure has been for COVID, I do not think that this issue is going away this year. And we really need to make sure that we are supporting our community. And I am a little disappointed that Tony Evers' plan, he didn't come up with a new one to really support the extension of the ending or the halting of evictions and continuing that on into the summer. I'm sorry, did that answer every question?
Oops. Yeah, we can go on. You want to go on to number 6,
Yeah.
next question, Ashley?
Oh, okay, sure. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. So, so how will you guarantee, maybe this is part of sort of your other a little bit, how will you guarantee housing to citizens? How will you deal with the financial situation of those facing eviction because of the pandemic? What specific solutions would you propose?
As I mentioned before, I advocate for ensuring that we guarantee housing for everyone. I think that when you take a housing first approach to issues involving homelessness, to homelessness, the issues surrounding homelessness all stabilize, whether that be food insecurity or a lack of access to job opportunities or an inability to manage your health or your mental health. When you take a housing first approach, it creates stability for people. So that's why I think it's important that we guarantee housing for everyone. In regards to the second point, facing the evictions because of the pandemics, I believe that we should be halting evictions and foreclosures in this time right now because it is unnecessary to be causing more confusion and frustration and fear for families in Wisconsin because they've now lost a job and they don't know how to afford their rent or their mortgage. And it's really important that we don't kick people out of their homes when we're asking them to please stay at home. And lastly, that's just the specific examples. That's it. That's all I have.
Thanks. You may have answered this one, but if you could just go over it briefly again. Will you fight for a single-payer healthcare system at the state level? Do you support a federal single-payer healthcare system?
Absolutely. Medicare for all was one of my top issues, but it's also so important right now with the outbreak of COVID-19 to recognize that health is not a personal issue. It's a public health issue. It's a community issue. So when we have a society where we say it's okay for certain members to not have access to healthcare, we're saying we don't believe that we as a community should be healthy or can be healthy. We don't want that in our future. Saying yes to Medicare for all is saying yes to everyone being healthy. It would be putting people over profit if we were to have a single payer healthcare system supported at the federal level. And I'm a huge supporter of that. At the statewide level, I said earlier, but I'll repeat, how I want to help make sure that Medicaid is expanded to make sure it's an option for everyone in the meantime until we get to Medicare for all.
Okay, great, thank you. So I guess this next question sort of also hits on a couple points you may have already said, but so will you pass workers' rights laws helping those who are forced to return to work but who risk infection from COVID-19? And the second part of the question is, absent the equivalent of a single payer system, will you push the state to guarantee medical coverage through Badger Care for those affected in this way?
Yes and yes. I think it's important that those who are still, those who we've referred to as essential workers right now, not only need to make sure that they are safe and that the PPE that's required for their work is created and present for them to be able to do their job, we also need to be treating them like the essential workers that they are. So if that means that means like actually paying them a livable wage, because we asked them to work. We needed them at our weakest as a community. When everyone else was asked to go home, they were still here. And if they can't have an affordable, livable wage, or an affordable life and a livable wage, then why are we doing this? I think that's extremely important as well in regards to also protecting and making sure that they have the rights to work safely, is making sure that they can live. And then the second question, would I support a expansion to make sure that that those affected by COVID are covered with their care? Yes, of course. Like I said, this is a community issue. It's not an individual person issue.
Okay. This one, we go through a number of propositions outlined in Campaign Zero, having to do with the police. And would you, and they're all yes, no, so I'll go through them quickly. And broken windows policing.
Yes.
Do you want community oversight of police?
Yes.
Do you want increased laws limiting the use of force?
Yes.
Do you want possible things like do you want independent investigation and prosecution of police?
Yes.
You want community representation over on these issues?
Yes.
Do you want to increase and enforce body cams and filming of the police?
Yes.
Do you want to increase training for police?
Yes.
Do you want to end for-profit policing?
Yes.
Do you support demilitarization of the police?
Yes.
Okay. Ashley, you want to take the rest, or you want me to keep going?
I guess I can do this next part. So the next question is sort of a follow-up, but it's a separate question to what we just asked. So, so in addition to that, so please respond to the following. It's kind of the format of I will support blank funding for the police. So here are your options: increasing, leveling, decreasing, or eliminating. So in other words, do you understand the question?
I believe I do. And I support decreasing funding for the police. While I also recognize that we are in favor of increasing training for police, I think there's money that's being spent that needs to be shifted around. When we are demilitarizing our police, that means we're not spending money on these basically weapons of war. When we're not doing that, we can then take that same funding to actually support programs such as training.
Okay, great. So there's two other parts to this question. So the second part is a scenario: a police officer in your jurisdiction has been filmed killing someone they have stopped or arrested. How do you respond?
Being someone who is deeply empathetic to the loss of life, I have watched the body cam videos of people in America being murdered by the police, and it is unbelievably heart-wrenching. It makes you feel angry, infuriated, frustrated, sad, alone, scared. And that's only like 5% of what the families of those individuals feel. So it is, as a representative, the first thing I would want to do is make sure that the family affected would have the access to any funding or any platform that they needed to express those concerns, those fears, their upset. Make sure that they're able to honor the person that they love the most in the world, who has been murdered by people who are supposed to protect us. Making sure that they have a space to share anything they need to. Then we would want to make sure that there's an independent investigation and that every avenue for justice is pursued. No one is above the law, and stealing the life from somebody is not something to be honored or to be hidden. It is something that we need to be authentic and integrous about. And lastly, I would want to make sure that those in the community who felt fear or frustration and are speaking out against the systems of injustice that exist for them, that I take my position to amplify those voices. That would be how I would respond.
Okay, great. And then just one more part to this question, and it's possible you've already said it, but the last part of this question is list other propositions regarding policing that you would fight for.
I'm going to take this opportunity to actually talk about a parallel issue, which it would be criminal justice reform. So specifically, there's the policing issue and the policing brutality, but then there's also the overarching system of criminal justice, which has for a long time been for-profit and a way to silence Black and brown people. I think it's important that we end for-profit prisons. I also think it's important that we are able to actively reduce the prison populations in Wisconsin. And lastly, I want to focus on rehabilitation, making sure that there are programs so that people who come out of our criminal justice system have every resource available to them to become the members of society that they want to be, that they're fully expressed and feel powerful in their ability to re-engage with our community.
Who did you support in the Democratic Party presidential primary this year, and why? And when did you start publicly supporting this person?
Okay, I voted for Bernie. I started phone banking for Bernie in March, and I supported Bernie. Why I supported Bernie was, first off, I would consider myself a socialist, and I really appreciated the approach he took to really push the Democratic Party. He came in with his enthusiasm and became a jumping off point for so many other movements. And I also really appreciated that the support for his campaign was the most diverse. The people that voted for Bernie, the percentage of them that were people of color was the highest of any candidate in the primary. And that's something that is really incredible. And when I learned that, I was just like further just in love with the movement that was created by his work.
Okay. So what is your analysis of the Evers administration's handling of the COVID-19 crisis in Wisconsin, including its handling of the processes leading up to the April 7th election? And same question for the state legislature.
So I personally wanted to see more. I had a plan that I thought effectively addressed way more than what Governor Evers was able to address. Pardon me one second. I also did not want to see Governor Tony Evers give up. I wanted to see him fight to the bitter end. I get really frustrated with this argument that the Republican legislature, they have the control. They do have control. But you are a leader, and I just wanted to see a fight to the bitter end. It was also incredibly dangerous to hold the election on April 7th. I would have liked to see more, like basically somebody ships a ballot to every registered voter, and a better addressing of the fact that students were completely displaced. Every single university was shut down weeks before the election. They all moved and were unable to get access to a ballot because we just didn't send it to them and didn't think about how students were going to be incredibly displaced and have no access to voting in the presidential primary. Whether they, especially if they, for instance, were a student here in Wisconsin and they lived in a state where the primary had already passed, then got displaced, were unable to vote here, then went home to a state where they also could not vote there. It was incredibly poor planning in by Wisconsin's leadership. And lastly, I think that in regards to the state legislature's responses to the COVID-19 pandemic, I was frustrated that the Supreme Court decision came back to say that the stay-at-home order could not be extended. And I'm frustrated that the state legislature then didn't extend it, because it's a tool that was extremely helpful. And in the future, if another pandemic were to come about, it would be very helpful to be able to have that tool. And now it's completely out of our capabilities as a government.
Sorry, are you supportive of the BDS, the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions movement?
Absolutely. I think it is an incredibly powerful option to be able to voice disdain towards organizations and governments that have done horrendous things. I also reached out to the Palestinian Student Union at the UW-Madison campus before the campus got shut down to ask for more information, as well as an endorsement, and then campus sort of shut down. So I'm 100% in support of this, but also recognize that I am not the expert.
All right. So do you believe that protesting is a form of speech, and therefore the right to do so, including BDS and anti-pipeline movements, should not be punished?
Yes, I agree that any form of protesting should not be punished, because it's the phrase that rioting is the language of the unheard is very pertinent to this question. It's something that, when you have no other way of expressing your upset, you should 100% be able to take down the large institutions or the corporations or the individual with a lot of money or a lot of power who has made it impossible for you to be heard, listened to, seen, expressed, powerful. Of course, you would want to be able to have the avenue to protest without being shut down. So I'm against shutting down of protests.
List unions that have already endorsed you in this race, if any, and which labor endorsements are you seeking?
I am seeking endorsements from MTI, AFL-CIO, Wisconsin Labor's District Council, and I also have open applications with Planned Parenthood. Oh, and Run for Something, which are other endorsement options, but not exactly unions.
So regarding fundraising, how much have you raised for this race to date? And this is kind of a several part question here. Who are your top 3 donors? What percentage of your total is from these top 3 donors? How much of it is strictly from small individual donors of less than $50? If this is not your first election, please answer this question regarding your last election also.
So here is what is so. So far we have raised $3,000. My top donor is Guy Comer. He is a philanthropist and a board member of the high school from which I graduated from. The second highest donor is my uncle, who is a retired engineer, and the third highest is my aunt, who is a retired accountant. The percentage of the donations that are from these top donors is technically half, but that's, and the percentage that are strictly from small individual donors is also half.
Okay. Do you support the legalization of recreational cannabis, including the expungement of all previous cannabis-related charges and the release of all those currently serving time on such charges?
Yes, I 100% support the legalization of recreational cannabis and making sure that we are retroactively expunging records and releasing people who have charges for cannabis possession.
Okay, and I believe this is the last question. So do you have paid staff or consultants working on your campaign? What percentage of your campaign funding goes to paid staff or consultants?
We are a completely volunteer-run organization here. Most of my background is actually in community organizing, and I find that to be my strength. So right now, none of our funds have been used for consultants or fancy campaign managers or anything like that.
Okay, great. I think that's it. Yeah, great.
That's it. Thanks a lot. We'll wrap up. Do you want to shut down the recording?
Yeah, I'll shut it down. Thank you everyone for joining and for watching this interview.
Thank you very much.